This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to a more civilized podcast. This is the podcast you're looking for. You may not go about your business. Stay here, listen, and then move along.
Oh my goodness. Listener, welcome to Nerf Nugget number 3. Tentatively called the Baxter Special, otherwise known as, Chris, what was it called?
The Absolutely Probably True History of Rogue One.
That's right. And as per our usual arrangement, I'm Kyler.
I'm Chris.
I'm still Ross.
Still. Hasn't changed. We've been working on it, but no success.
I can change if I have to, I guess.
That's right. Wow, if any of you get that reference, please let me know, because your coolness will have just gone up. So this is a special Nerf Nugget. Ross and I have no idea what this Nerf Nugget is about to be about.
Yeah.
Only Chris does. Chris had an idea. He told us, hey guys, I have an idea for a Nerf Nugget. And then we said, cool, what's it about? And he said, I'm not telling any of you. So
because I wanted to get their reactions firsthand.
So we are very excited to hear what it is he has to say.
So let me tell you a little bit about where this little episode came from. I was reading some comments online somewhere, I don't even remember, somewhere on Facebook, I think, somewhere far, far from our group. But someone had made a comment. This was just after the articles about the Last Jedi trolls, half of them being Russian bots or whatever. and so there were a lot of people grousing about, like, I don't need Russians to tell me that The Last Jedi was bad. And there was someone that had complained about, one of their complaints about The Last Jedi was that both sides of the conflict were inept. He's like, the Empire, the First Order is making horrible decisions and how they track these people down, but it works out anyway because the Resistance is making horrible decisions left and right too. And I just commented on there and went, wow, you must really have hated Rogue One. And because there's nothing more fun than tweaking people who hate The Last Jedi but love Rogue One, for me.
As we learned in our Last Jedi and Rogue One episodes.
No, it's because you know, when they're not prepared. They're not prepared for even the suggestion that Rogue One is not great. And so I briefly was just like, he's just like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, come on, think about it, man. I mean, Galen Erso sends this message out and just forgets that he could have just told them all the information they needed on the Death Star in that message. But it's okay because Krennic does such a horrible job of hunting down this information and what's going on. Like, and it actually made me stop and think for a second. I was like, what did they even think Pilot had? Like, if he didn't have Death Star plans, what were they thinking? Because, and Krennic is so poor at hunting down whatever's, what's going on here that, he tells Tarkin the leak has been plugged, and Tarkin's like, well, it came from Galen Erso's facility, and it's just this moment where it's just like, Krennic, you're claiming the leak has been plugged, and you didn't even bother to find out where this guy came from. What did you even think he had if you didn't even know where he came from or what he was doing? Like, it was just this moment. And then you go back, it's like, okay, so then, it's like they get down to Scarif, and they start bombing stuff, and things are exploding, and they're like, holy crap, what's going on? Hey, let's just leave the only way on and off the planet completely wide open through this entire thing. Let's not bother to, like, try and trap these people here, prevent them from bringing anything else in, any of that. Like, that should have been the number one thing, It's like, hey, something's going on, close the gates. That's the first thing we do in any situation. But it's okay, because Radisson shows up later without thinking and gets them to do it for them and strains his own people behind. Like, and it's like, yeah. And so back and forth. So I was just laying that out, but I got thinking as I was driving home from work later that day, and that popped into my head again, and I was like, what it really reminds me of? Both on Edau with that base and its single defense cannon and nothing else, except for a couple TIE fighters, and Scarif with their complete lack of procedure for anything to do if something like this happens, and no backup, like the backup not arriving until light years after the rebels showed up. When the rebels intercepted the transmissions calling for backup, like, theoretically these people should have arrived at the same time, and yet they just don't show up for the whole thing. And what it reminded me of was DMing a campaign, where I'm like, okay, I've either, Edau is more of like this feeling of like, I didn't expect you guys to go here, so I'm just making this up off the top of my head, and then afterwards I go, oh man, yeah, that would have been a lot more logical, wouldn't it? They really should have had more defenses than that. Yeah, but I forgot. Oh, well.
Players are already there.
And Scarif feels like more like, well, this is taking so long, and that wasn't what I wanted the meat of this session to be. So yeah, backup should have shown up here, and yeah, they should have done this. But none of you are calling it out, so I'm just going to let that slide, and we'll just be like, yeah, good job, guys, look at all you did, and we'll move on, because I don't want to get bogged down in this. And I was thinking about that, and all of a sudden I went, Rogue One is someone's Star Wars RPG campaign. That is where Rogue One came from. It is absolutely probably where it came from.
Okay.
And so, and I got thinking, almost every problem I have with Rogue One suddenly makes perfect sense if I look at this as someone's
D&D
RPG campaign. Yeah,
Yeah.
D&D campaign. You know, like Darths and Droids style, where they're playing a Star Wars RPG. So I looked at this and I was like, okay, Jin, whoever's playing Jin, is new to the group and to the game. She's never played before. She got invited to play by her boyfriend, who's playing Cassian.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and-
Which is
and
why
so-
they inexplicably try to have a love story, but it
Exactly.
doesn't make sense.
It's real world linking into the game. So you know, we've been through this. We have invited loved ones to play this
Yeah.
game and been like, yeah, I want my wife to get into this, or my girlfriend, depending on, you know, we've done this multiple times, and
Over several years. Even.
yeah, and exactly. So we know what that's like, and so Jin is the one that was like, yeah, I don't know what this is. I have no idea what I'm getting into, but my boyfriend wants me to try it, so okay. So her boyfriend in the DM rolled up a character for her. They're like, hey, what do you want to be? And she's, you know, they gave her some options, and she was like, I guess a rogue, whatever that is, a sneak sounds fun. And they went, okay,
Rogue
cool.
One?
Ooh. And so Cassian was like, sweet, I kind of wanted to play more of a sneaky type scout soldier, so that'll be great. We'll work well together. And so they rolled that up, and she's just like, okay, I don't know. So they start playing their first session. And she really doesn't know what's going on. We've seen people in that situation, right? Where they're just like, what do I do? And so the DM's telling her, okay, you're locked up, you're in this transport, a bunch of guys come in, they shoot your guards, and then they take they're saying your assumed name that you've got, and they take your binders off your wrists, and she goes, okay, well, she looks at her sheet and she's like, well, I've got an attack stat, I guess I'll attack. And he goes, what? Okay. Because she doesn't know what she's doing. I have literally seen a first-time player just go, I'm just going to attack because I have that
That's
on
what
my
it says
sheet.
on my paper.
Yeah, and I have no idea. So then he's like, okay. And then she ends up getting railroaded by him when K2SO slams her to the ground. It's like, okay, that's not where this was going to go. So he pulls her in. And so you've got all of this, for the first chunk of this campaign, she has no idea what's going on, which is why she doesn't have much of a character. She doesn't ever really react to anything. She has to get pushed along and railroaded by the DM in order to get anything done because she doesn't know. And so he's trying to set up like hooks for like, yeah, role playing and story and all this stuff, and being like, yeah, these people have taken you prisoner and they are going to hold you prisoner unless you do what they want. And she goes, okay. And he goes, all right, well, let's go off. And then what happens is she gets to Jeddah. She you know, he probably didn't even mean it to be a story hook. He's just like, yeah, there's fighting going on, and he's trying to show that Saw Gerrera's men are bad because there's like a kid in the way. And she goes, what? There's a kid in the way? And she's like, I'm going to run out and get the girl. And he's like, crap, what? Okay. Okay. Well, I guess. And so she runs out there, and that's why Cassian has to shoot the guy to save her. He's like, well, I had a guy up here was about to throw this, and Cassian's guy is like, okay, I'll shoot him. And then she rolled really well for her combat in that, which is where you have that one scene where it's just inexplicably amazing combat from Jin.
She got a nat 20,
where even
huh?
Cassian is, she got a series of nat 20s, and she just like, she's a rogue. She's not even supposed to be able to do that
Sneak
sort of thing.
attacking everybody.
And Cassian's just like, dang, that was, and who knows, maybe the DM's like fudging numbers behind his screen because he's like, well, yeah,
We don't
I
wanna
want her to
scare
have
her
a fun
away.
time. Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
scare her away. I want her to have a fun time. So she finally starts getting into it. After that, he's like, well, you got captured by Saw's men. And she's like, okay, who is this? And he tells her, like, yeah, this is, you have a background with him. And she's like, all right, yeah. Yeah, he just, I'm going to have abandonment issues. That's why that doesn't come up at all until that conversation, is because that's where she came up with it and dropped it in. And he went, okay. And then he gave her the hook with her dad and everything. And then as they went along, and this is another thing I'm sure we've all seen, is you get a first-time player and they start playing the character you helped them make. And then partway through, they start to realize, that's not the character that comes naturally
it's
to
not
me.
the
That's
play
not the
style
character
that
I
I
want to
want
play.
or whatever,
She developed into more of a paladin, which is why she just abruptly shifts behavior halfway through, is because that's when this woman figured out who she wanted to play and suddenly started playing it differently. And everyone else went, yeah, that's cool. We know how that goes. If that's what you want to be, you be that. That's cool. And so she shifts and she does that for the rest of the thing. That's why she doesn't argue with Cassian until after they've both already made their dramatic shifts, is because that's when she figured out role-playing, and she's going, oh yeah, let's do some of that. Let's have some character conflict. This will be cool. And he's like, all right, yeah, let's do that.
Wow. Okay. So, first reaction is, that's brilliant.
Thank you.
I wish I had thought of that, and I wish this were my idea. But second of all, maybe you will hate this, but the fact that it makes so much sense as a D&D campaign actually makes me love it even more.
No, that's fine. I don't care.
Because I love D&D and I love Star Wars.
It makes me like it more, because I finally have a background schema that fits the entire thing, and it fits in my head. So, we've got Cashin. Cashin's been playing this game for a long time. Mm-hmm. He's very used to it, so he came up with this character that he really liked. He was
dark and gritty.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
he was a dark and gritty guy. He's a guy he's a good guy, but he's doing really bad things, and he's not afraid to do bad things. He is lawful neutral. Yeah. Like, he does what needs to be done, or at least some version of lawful neutral, right? True neutral, maybe, but even though he's more naturally inclined to be a good person, but he has subsumed his goodness for the greater good in a way. And so he's got this cool idea. So in his opening scene, which the DM had them all split up and then brought them together because he didn't just want to start them in a tavern, and because that's a cliche. And so for his opening scene, he played his character exactly how he wanted. And then they met up as a group, and he realized that in order to keep playing his character like that, he would have to be mean to his girlfriend's character. Mm-hmm. And he got worried that was going to put her off of the game if he was a jerk to her. And she was going to be going, what are you doing? Why are you attacking me? Like, why are you getting mad at me? And so he just backed away from it and went, oh, okay, well, I'll do that later once she's more into this and everything. So he got kind of stabbed back and went, no, I'm not going to get mad at her. I'm not going to take the gun from her.
I was just going to say, sure, you can have your gun, sweetie.
Exactly. I'm not going to shout at her or get upset because she just dove into combat in our sneaky mission here. And
every sneaking game I play,
yeah,
every Assassin's Creed, like everything, try to be sneaky, end up murdering everyone in my path.
And then once she started role playing, she's the one who started an argument with him, and he went, "Oh, okay, she's getting into it. Finally, I can start playing my character a bit." But by then it was a little too late, and there wasn't a lot left for him to do. But then he started getting back into it and playing his character a bit more once his girlfriend started getting into it. So then there's K2SO. K2SO is the guy who can never quite make a full session. So he's there for the opening session where the DM uses him to railroad
raise your hand
Jin.
If you've been there, done that, seen this person.
And so he shows up for the next session where he has time to chat with Jin and stuff, and then it's like, they opened with the stuff of Jin and Cashin's meeting with the rebels and everything going on, and so he didn't have much to do. Or maybe he was late, and so they didn't bring him in until later, and then he's like, oh yeah, I had a conversation, and then that's about it. He shows up for the next session, they fly in, they do some stuff, and then he's like, oh, I gotta go. So you go into the city without me, I guess. I'll just stay here with the ship. Or they tell him, well, yeah, we'll just tell you to stay here with the ship. And then he shows up for the next session, which is halfway through Jeddah, so he's just like, well, I guess I come into the city.
Yeah, I got bored.
Well, it's like, they didn't need an excuse. It's just like he wasn't here then, so he just stayed behind, and now he's here, so of course he came into the city. But then he had to leave halfway through, so he showed up, he threw a grenade, he lied to some Imperials, and then he went, oh, guys, I gotta go. Sorry everyone. I guess I'm gonna go back to the ship. He shows up for the next one, flies them out of Jeddah, and then he flies them into Edau, crashes the ship, and is like, sorry, and now I gotta go. So he just sits with the ship on there. And then he shows up for the last one when they go to Scarif, and he's like, yeah, all right, I'm here. And then he goes, oh, guys, I gotta go. Can I just sacrifice I know this is the last session. Can I just heroically, which is why he's the first one to die. And then so that he can leave.
Or alternately, that's the point when the player of K2SO started pissing everyone off enough, they're just like, hey, your character dies, don't come back.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So, then we have Chirrut and Baze. Baze has played the game a lot, but not with this group. He's new to this group. His friend Chirrut invited him, which is why he never interacts with anyone but Chirrut, because he's a shy person. Mm-hmm. And so he has basically no interaction with anyone else, because he doesn't know any of them, and he's really uncomfortable with that. Later sessions, I'm sure he would have joined in eventually. But he and Chirrut worked out in advance, like, yeah, we want to be buddies, we want to do this and this, kind of like you and Peter did with Ronaldo and Richard. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're going to be brothers, we're going to have this. And then the next campaign, we suddenly bring in Ronaldo's sister out of nowhere, because it's like, yeah, we want we're going to do that again.
Ronaldo is a character played by our friend Peter in a campaign that Chris DM'd.
In multiple campaigns.
And,
I played the paladin.
yeah, Ross played the...
Richard.
They were brothers. Richard was half human, half Asmar.
Yep.
Or half celestial, sorry, which is what Asmar is.
Yeah.
And then Ronaldo was half human, half ogre.
We worked it out.
It was quite the family dynamic.
I mean, it made sense.
It was great. It was all great. But yeah, so they worked out in advance. Yeah, we're going to do this thing with, like, you've got faith and I've lost my faith and we're going to do all this. But Chirrut was too much of a min-maxer to actually build a character that fit the story they wanted to tell. He was too focused on building a min-max character who could do really awesome stuff and kind of neglected all the story stuff that they had been going to do. He was bigger on, like, no, I'm going to do awesome things and then I'm going to do this and I'm going to be clever and I'm going to make jokes. And so Baze was just sitting there like, well, we were going to do a thing. And they didn't really tell the DM about it in advance, so the DM wasn't really giving them any storylines until the end where it's like, well, we were going to do this thing. And the DM was like, oh, okay. I can fit that into this end. Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. And so that's why that happened. And then we have Pilot, who is the guy who
is Bodhi.
Well, the whoever's playing him could have been named anything, but
Dang it, Chris.
but there's a reason for this. Okay,
It's not the way that fight was supposed to go.
He was supposed to play this campaign, but he never showed up. So the DM was like, okay, I'm going to have to... I know he's going to be
fair.
here.
That's
I don't
fair,
know what his
actually.
character's going to be named,
Yeah.
which is why we just always refer to him as the pilot. And so he's like, okay, yeah, he's been captured by Saw, and he's trying to do this, but yeah, we'll get to that later, guys. And then his friend kept not showing up, so finally he was like, you know what, I'm gonna roll for him. Oh crap, he got a nat 1. I guess he's a vegetable now. And then they're like, okay, we're gonna go to Edau. And he's like, wait, that's not... Like, the message told you to go to Scarif. You're going to Edau after Galen? You need someone to get you that... I guess we've got his character. Okay, fine. We'll bring his character in. He just snaps out of it conveniently because I need him there. And then he gets you onto Edau. And then it's like, crap, now you rolled poorly and you crashed your ship. You're going to need another one. I don't want to roleplay all of that. Pilot will go do that. And just off screen, he'll somehow waltz into this shipyard, even though he's a wanted man that everyone is looking for. Yeah. And he'll just waltz in there and grab a ship with no problem whatsoever because it's all off screen, so whatever, who cares? And we'll have him take care of that so you guys can actually do story stuff over here. And then, out of nowhere, that player showed up for the final session of the campaign, and so all of a sudden he was like, well, now I have to come up with something for him to do. Which is why that ending feels so video gamey, because he's trying to give every player something to do, because this isn't characters doing things, it's people doing things. And so he's like, okay, I gotta come up with something for Pilot to do. I guess you have to hook a bunch of stuff up to make a weirdly complicated phone call. Yeah. And so he came up with this for the pilot, and that's why the pilot, is just the pilot and doesn't do much until the end, when he's still not doing that much. And then other things that made sense, I'm like looking at that, it's like the DM didn't want them to save Galen, because then they wouldn't have to go to Scarif, because if they rescue Galen, he's like, really logically, he should have been able to tell them about this in the message, but he didn't, because, DMing.
It's a plot hook.
Because the DM said so, yeah. And so then they go to Edau to try and rescue Galen, and he's like, but I've already built this awesome installation at Scarif. Rebel pilots show up and Galen dies. And he's like, at first he's like, oh no, it's okay, because this guy will kill him. But then Cassian went, no, I don't want to, that'll piss my girlfriend off. She's just starting to get into this. And so the DM was like, crap, you can't rescue him. Bombs fall, everybody dies. Okay. And that's that. And then you've got, the DM had Saw stay behind because he already put Pilot in the group and he didn't want another NPC in the group. He's like, no, I don't want to handle, I'm already piloting Pilot as the DM, and I've got other NPCs around, and I've got the bad guys. I don't want to bring Saw along. So Saw, no, he stays behind because he's old. And I already mentioned the Edau Scarif installations being weirdly softly defended. It's like, that feels exactly like so many bases that I have DM'd. The constant railroading of Jin is just the DM being like, okay, well, you're not role-playing, so I'm going to make you do stuff.
Yeah, come on, new player.
Yep.
We'll show you how to do it.
The Jedi fight being a succession of characters showing off their abilities, well, that's exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. It was the first real combat situation they'd all landed in, so they each were like, okay, I'm going to do the stuff, and the DM was like, yeah, sure, I know you can do that, so let's let you show that off one after another. And And Radish showing up at the end out of nowhere is because he needed something for Pilot to do, and he was like, okay. And then he'd already decided at that point, it's like, okay, Jin's getting into this, but she doesn't want to be playing this character, and Cashin hasn't really gotten to play this character because of what she's doing, and Pilot's not even here ever, and K2SO's constantly leaving. Why don't we do another... We'll just finish this campaign up and we'll do another one, so this will be the big ending. And so at that point, he's like, you know what? None of them need to survive this. It's okay if Redison just shows up and does all this stuff. and so that is the absolutely probably true history of Rogue One.
I liked it.
You know what? Yeah, and it's... All I could think about was how... So, did you all do Stranger Things when it was a huge...
I love
phenomenon?
Stranger Things,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, I do too. One thing that was pointed out was how awesome it is that the kids can use D&D to kind of frame all the craziness that's happening in their world.
Yep.
It's so true. That's exactly how that would happen. We can see here how a framework of knowing D&D helps us kind of make better sense of Rogue One.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, you can do this with a lot of plots. I mean, the very anyone who's read DM of the Rings, the webcomic DM of the Rings, which is just a guy taking Lord of the Rings and pretending that Lord of the Rings was never a thing, and now we're playing D&D, which was based heavily off of the mythos created by Tolkien, and it's like, let's do Lord of the Rings as a D&D campaign. And so you've got all these players doing ridiculous things, and it's all this backstory of like, and it's hilarious, it's fun. And then Darths and Droids is a Star Wars take the same way of them going through and being like, oh yeah, but they're also drastically heavily changing the plot in a lot of ways to make it fit the behavior of a D&D player.
Sure.
Where I'm like, this all already fits. Like, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It's good. So my question is, okay, so Cassian is a rogue.
Cashin is, I would say he's like a scout, or he's like a fighter / rogue.
Okay. Jin starts as a rogue and then multi-classes to paladin.
Well, starts behaving as a paladin,
Okay.
even though she doesn't actually change anything.
Fair enough. What are the other classes?
You know, I have not played enough Star Wars RPG, but I'm like...
No, I mean...
Chirrut's a monk.
Chirrut's he's a monk in D&D parlance, but basically Chirrut is he took a Jedi class and nerfed it slightly for the DM's sake, because the DM's like, no, we're playing just before Star Wars, like just before A New Hope, that you can't be a Jedi, and he's like, but let me be Force sensitive, like look, let me find, we've got some obscure Force sensitive classes, or we'll nerf these parts of this, and in exchange you'll give me this and this, right? Come on, and in exchange for me giving a bicite, you'll give me this and this, right? And
he is a min-maxer.
He is, yeah.
You're right.
That's exactly how it works.
I'm seeing like,
and then
K2
Baze is just
like
straight
a bard, the way he plays out.
Yeah, I could see him being bardic. He's got the knowledge and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then Baze is straight fighter. He's a
yeah. I like what Darths and Droids did, though, where Baze is Chirrut's familiar.
That makes a lot of sense, too.
Then Chirrut can see through his familiar's eyes, which is why he's so accurate. Or Chirrut can see through his familiar Baze's eyes, so he gets a sense of what's around him and stuff.
That's awesome.
That's hilarious.
Which then, of course, they later point out in Darths and Droids that you're essentially getting away with playing 2 full characters because of the way you've done this. Yep. And your limited eyesight for the trade-off of having a familiar when you shouldn't have one is really no longer an issue for you.
Classic min-max.
Yeah, it is.
Like, I'll also share a brief moment where one of my classic DM mistakes with that sort of thing was where I did not realize what I had done to... I had given my players, where I had a player who worshipped Loplop, the chicken god of chaos. Hail Loplop. And she wanted to do a, kind of a switcher where she's just like, look, I'll take this penalty where, like, I want this bonus. It was a pretty small bonus where it's just like a certain amount of times a day, or like if they maybe once a day, she could roll a die and just get a random bonus depending on what the die rolled. And I was like, okay, it's a random bonus, so you never know what it's going to do. It's not as useful. And in exchange, anytime she took anything out of any container, including her own pockets, there was a 50-50 chance that instead of whatever she had intended to grab, she would end up with a chicken. And I was like, that sounds fun. Mm-hmm. Let's do that. And then first session, we've got a pair of half-ogres.
Pause, because when the rest of us heard that, that's what was my thought, was like, oh, that's going to be bad.
Yeah. And I was like, that sounds fun. And so we had a pair of half-ogres in this group, and I was like, okay, you are traveling in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, basically, at this point in the game. So you're going to have to scrounge for food and everything. And she was like, I've got food. And I went, oh, dang it. And she's like, look, let me just grab a handful of pebbles, put them in my pocket. I've got 100 pebbles there, so statistically I should end up with about 50 chickens. And I was just like, well, okay, don't worry about food. And that started out as you get to not worry about food, but it became hey, we're in a war-torn economy, a war-torn country that is hard up on food and everything. Why don't we break the entire economy? We got a semi-truck, we filled it to the brim with chickens.
Yep.
We sold them all on the black market for a ludicrous price, completely flooded the market. And then since nobody knows exactly what's going on with the black market, we went to the legitimate market and flooded that too. And then we hurried to the next town and did the same thing because word hadn't reached them yet. Yep. They utterly just destroyed the economy of this poor country, but at least they fed a lot of people. But yeah, just broke the economy, and I just had all these moments of just like, oh god, this was supposed to be a detriment. It was classic, wonderful D&D playing where you turn any detriment to your advantage. It was beautiful, but it was also just anyway. But then they ran into a eldritch creature, Cthulhu-like creature who subverted that, and instead of getting chickens, you got little baby Cthulhus in. That was fun too, because any DM can turn anything back to their own advantage.
But we're also
because you are the god of that world. You can do what you want.
Coming from one of those players that took full advantage of that.
Yeah. Ross's character converted to the worship of Lop Lop.
I did. We ended up building chicken coops every so often, for our worship.
To Lop Lop.
That was close enough to the end of the campaign. It wasn't really a big deal anymore. We had all the use out of it we could take. We had all the money we ever needed, all the food we ever needed.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was great.
Yep.
I still try and worship Lop Lop in every campaign I play.
Oh, no.
Try to.
Alrighty.
Some DMs are friendlier than others.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I had fun when I came up with that. I was telling these guys earlier, I was just like, when I came up with this, I was like, I have to tell Kyler and Ross. It's perfect. And then I was like, well, I don't want to just type it up in our group text. That would take way too long. Maybe I'll post it on Facebook. Then I was like, no, that's still more time than I want to take typing this. and so I told my wife, and then I was like, oh, you know what? We've got a podcast. I'm going to make the world listen to this.
That's right.
Or the very small subset of the world that listens to this. And but then I was sitting there. I was like, well, I got to tell someone. So I told Jess about it, and it was like she appreciates the D&D side of this. She hasn't seen Rogue One since the theater, though. And she's just sort of like, okay, whatever. And I was like, you've only got about half the appreciation for this. So I told my sister about it, and it's like, she got all the Star Wars stuff, but she also has not seen Rogue One since the theater. Plus, she hasn't played a lot of RPGs, so it fell even more flat for her. And I was sitting there, I was like, I need Kyler and Ross, who have played all the RPGs and have watched all the Star Wars and have had the full discussion of all my problems with Rogue One.
Our Venn diagram crosses real well here.
We've got these three circles of know my opinions on Rogue One, no Star Wars front, back, and forward, and no RPGs front, back, and forward. And we're right in the center there with you two. And I was like, I need them.
So in other words, we're cutting off half of our listener base. So those of you that like Star Wars and D&D will get full appreciation for this episode.
This episode is for you.
That's right.
Yep, that's why it's a Nerf Nugget.
Now, if you aren't an RPG player and you're listening to this, why aren't you an RPG player?
I know,
that's the real
seriously,
question,
go out.
Honestly.
If you want a Star Wars RPG, there are Star Wars RPGs. If you don't feel like that, there is D&D everywhere.
D&D 5th edition is particularly easy to get into.
If you're
worried about it being complicated or whatever, 5th edition is extremely easy to get into.
I would also, if you love the Star Wars and you want the sci-fi, try Planet Mercenary, which is an RPG from Howard Taylor, the maker of Schlock Mercenary, the webcomic, which you should also read. And that one is also extremely easy to get into, very accessible, and you don't even need to go buy a full set of dice. All you need is 3d6 per player to play that game. Very simple, very fun, and I had the pleasure of copy editing their handbook, and so that is the most fun I have.
He raves about it every time it comes up.
It is the most fun I have ever had with any editing project ever. This source book is worth picking up and reading on its own, which I cannot say of any other source book for any game I've ever played. And I've played a lot of games. So Planet Mercenary, I cannot recommend hardly enough. Now, if you're on the other side of this and you do love RPGs, but you're not a fan of Star Wars, why are you listening to us?
I mean, we appreciate you listening.
Yeah, thanks,
and
but this is a more civilized podcast about Star Wars.
But it does raise some questions.
Thanks, Mom, I guess. But that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. Our mothers.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I think that's...
that's all I got.
So, just as a reminder, our very next episode, our dear host Ross here is going to take us on a magical journey through time and space as we explore pixels from a galaxy far, far away.
Ooh, I like that. Wow, that's nice. Nice.
I wrote that in a very drunken, tired state last night, so it sounded ridiculous then, and I loved it now. So
a journey through space-time and LucasArts.
That's right.
Yes.
The arts of Lucas?
The arts of
Lucas. Oh, boy. Wow. Anyway, be sure to follow us on Twitter at More Civilized and join our Facebook group, A More Civilized Podcast.
Oh, it's me. Yep. Also, you can follow our podcast on our website at amorecivilizedpodcast.podbean.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Mr_R*star.
Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Itinerant Baxter. If you so desire, I don't post on there very often. It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Yep.
But
yeah, there we go. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
Always.
I'm Anna Graves, and thank you for listening to A More Civilized Podcast.